Hello there, everybody in UK Cant Bookland. I'm here with Luca Veste to talk about his latest book, You Never Said Goodbye. If you could tell us a bit about the plot, please, Luca. It'd be great to understand where you got the unusual plot from.
Yeah. So the book is about Sam Cooper, who has been estranged from his father for 20 years. He's moved to London basically to be away from his father, who lives in a small town in southwest of England. He gets a call to go back because his father's in hospital. When he gets there, he finds out that A, his dad has been attacked by some unknown assailants, and B, his dad's final words to him are that your mother is alive. The reason why that's such a shock to Sam is that he was there when his mum died 25 years ago. So that leaves Sam trying to find out the truth of what happened all those years ago. The plot came directly from personal life. When I was 8 years old, my mum left us, my brother and sisters, and it was one of those weird situations. Like when you're 8, I was 8 years old. I didn't really know, really what was going on, but I did know enough to know that something was wrong. She left a couple of days before Mother's Day, and told us she was going to come back for Mother's Day, but she didn't come back, and she didn't come back for a number of months. And when I think about this later on, it's like, well, she did come back, and I still see her now. But what if she'd never come back? What if I never knew what had happened to her? And that's where the book came from, is that general idea of just like, never really known the truth about a significant event in your life, something that shapes you as a person, and can, really have an effect on you as an adult. And that's what happens with Sam in the book, is that he is really affected by the events of what happened in his childhood. So when someone comes along and says, what you believe may have happened isn't the actual truth, how far are you willing to go to find out what actually happened all those years ago?
Yeah, it's a very unusual and different setup compared to the police procedurals that you started life with. What made you change to standalones in that kind of style? Because it was the 6 wasn't normal either, I would say.
I've never been normal, to be honest, Alex. No, so I wrote 4 books in the Murphy and Rossi series, which were police procedurals at the heart of it. Yeah, I do believe that they were always a little bit skew-if to the police procedural series, but I think that had more to do with the setting, because they're all set in Liverpool. I think that had a lot of influence on those novels. But the when I got to like the 4th Murphy Rossi, which was Then She Was Gone, I knew I wanted to try something different. And I'm very much influenced by the crime horror genre crossover. You got the John Connollys or Steve Mosby or Mo Hader, or in that kind of vein. They were all my favorite authors, and I thought, well, I want to try something akin to that. I grew up reading horror, and I thought I wanted to try my own version of that. So I wrote The Bone Keeper. And it being a standalone, it was a bit of a risk. I didn't, because usually for the first 4 books, it was, right, what are Murphy and Rossi up to this week? It's that you have that kind of basis to kind of fall back on as those 2 main characters. This was very much going into the unknown. And what I realized through writing that was how much enjoyment I got out of that as a writer was something I hadn't experienced before since I'd written my debut. So I followed that up quickly, writing the 6. Which was then another way of taking myself out of the comfort zone, because there are no police officers in that book. I wrote the 6 after I wrote the game, but they were published the other way around, which is always strange. But the 6 was very much the bridge between those police kind of character-led novels that I'd written before to what You Never Said Goodbye is. And You Never Said Goodbye is very much a kind of testament to my, massive reading list, of like, I will read in any genre of most writers. I'll read anything because I'm always interested. to see what's going on in other genres as well. And I'm a massive Linwood Barclay fan. I'm a massive Harlan Coben fan. And this idea, which, as I said earlier, was like, very directly resulted from something that happened to myself, I knew would only work in a certain kind of genre. Yeah. So when I came to write You Never Said Goodbye, I knew I had to approach it in a different way. And I knew I wanted to always try this kind of novel, this kind of something happens on every page. Something, it's not just, and in those early drafts that I did of the book, there was many of those moments that you can get away with in a police procedural, which is two characters talking about what's happened and how we're going to approach it next. You can't do that in this kind of book. It's very much pace is really important. So I started writing, and as I said, did a few drafts, and it's still my favorite book I've written by a mile, because it felt so invigorating as a writer. I've been doing this for 10 some years now, and I felt like I was like kind of accessing something in my brain that I hadn't done before, of just like that kind of relentless pace and character led, that psychological nuance that comes with the kind of plot that's going on, and these characters that just felt so real to me, because they were very much based on something personal, and it's a genre which I think I'll be writing in for a while now.
Yeah. What made you decide to do that kind of style? Because, as you say, something did happen on every page, and it must be difficult to make sure that happens. And this definitely the start of the book, very dramatic.
Yeah, I think it's a. I've always believed that I have to push myself as a writer, and to kind of test myself more than anything, because I came to this very late. I didn't write a word until I was 28, 29 years of age, which is about 10 years ago. I wasn't a writer as a kid. I wasn't that kid in school who used to, in English classes, write something and give it to the teacher and wait for all that. I never did that. I barely turned up. I was terrible in school. I was the kid that just used to get away with murder because I could, make the teachers laugh, that kind of thing. I was the class clown more than anything. But when I started writing and realized that this is kind of what I should have been doing for all my life, because, I enjoy it so much, I'm always fearful of that tap on the shoulder of, we made a mistake, you shouldn't be here. So I don't want to rest on my laurels. And it turns out that if you talk to writers, they all say that. All the best ones do anyway, is that they always push themselves to write a better book every time. So You Never Said Goodbye, when I wrote it, is I think is the best book I've written. And it's because I pushed myself to write in an unfamiliar genre, unfamiliar settings, and didn't kind of take the easy road out with trying, I'd wanted to do as much as possible with that character and push that character as much as possible and have so much going on, because I know readers will enjoy that, because I'm one of those readers. If I'm reading a thriller like a Linwood Barclay or a Harlan Coben thriller, it's because I want to be entertained for 400 pages. I want to be able to sit there and find it really difficult to put that book down, and that's exactly what I was driving for with this book.
What's the reaction been like in America? Because you weren't able to go out and do research for the location.
Well, I was. It's a funny story, because I literally missed the first lockdown by 2 weeks. When I got home, I did a week or so in Connecticut, and I did plan to go back out, but I couldn't, obviously. But I literally just timed it spectacularly right for the first time in my life. So I went out at the beginning of March 2020 to a town in Connecticut called Mystic, and spent a week just going around the place and talking to people and going to bars and going to diners and bookshops and everywhere I could try to find, and just talking to people. And I had many plans to go back and research a lot more of Connecticut and obviously didn't get the chance because, as I said, like I got home on like the 10th of March, and I think about 11 days later we were all in lockdown.
Yeah.
So I didn't get the chance to go back, but the reaction in the States, I mean, it's not out in the States yet, it's out later this year. But the very early reaction from people over there has been, it's been really good, which is heartening, because you always worry with that kind of thing, because a lot of the chapters are from American character points of view, and it took me a long time to make sure I got that right. Because we are we are two countries separated by a common language. The things that they say over there is very different to what we would say over here. So I had to spend a lot of time getting that right. But the reaction from in-house at my American publishers, my American agent, who actually lives in Connecticut, so she was very much invested in this, getting this right. We're all very much of the same thing. But I think, again, we may be, as I said, two countries divided by a common language, but I think our cultures are so intertwined at this point. So I only have to switch on the television and I'll find an American drama or sitcom within 5 seconds of sitting down. We are very much intertwined, and culture-wise, maybe not them from us so much, but what they do is they just take our culture and then remake it into their own. So like the American Office is like, there's very little relation to the English version, but the UK version. But it's not difficult to kind of be immersed in that culture, and that's what I did basically for a year. Was immerse myself in a lot of YouTube videos, and I did a lot of Google Street Mapping. But that week that I spent in Connecticut was invaluable, because just listening to people and the way they talk is great for picking up on the nuances of language and conversation, and the way they people just talk to each other is just it's bread and butter for a writer.
When you say about the way people talk to each other, did you learn the dialogue through acting, or?
I mean, dialogue has always been like something really important to me. I mean, when I started writing Dead Gone, I didn't know anything. I didn't know what I was doing. Dead Gone's my first book, and I didn't know what I was doing. I had absolutely no idea how to write a novel. I'd written a few short stories before that, but not a lot. And I what I did is I would go on a bus and just travel around Liverpool and just listen to people, and I would write down observations and things like that. And I think because I've got an acting background, and I've got a performing background, that does help a lot, because you are if you're doing a play, for example, it's all dialogue. It's very heavy on dialogue. And my favorite plays that I've ever done are always based on dialogue. So you do pick up all of these things just subconsciously of just how people talk and things like that. But I also come from a very large family, half Italian, half Scouse. I'm one of 9 kids. My dad's one of 23. I've got uncles and aunties like you wouldn't believe. I've got cousins everywhere. So when we all get together, it's just talking and talking and talking, and that I think is just. I think people watching this will realize, I talk a lot, and I think dialogue's important in a novel. You never say goodbye. There is a substantial lot of dialogue, but there's also a lot of It's not just there to pretty up the page. It's there to serve a purpose, which is what I think is a little bit different about this book than previous novels. But I wanted everything to feel authentic. And I think I kind of drew on a lot of different aspects of my background and the research I did to do so.
In the early part of the book, one of the characters is a big Elvis fan. Are you an Elvis fan? And if so, what's your favourite song that he wrote?
I wouldn't say I can't. I'm not going to start, listing his his birth date. I know he died I think he died the day after my birthday. I think that's as much as I know about that kind of thing. So trivia wise, I'm not the biggest fan. I like a lot of his songs, but one of the songs that I listen to quite heavily, and it's definitely my my favorite Elvis song, is an American trilogy. And for some reason, that song did permeate throughout the book of that. And
Yeah.
the opening scene, the character is listening to that song just before something bad happens. So like that is my favorite Elvis song. I grew up listening to Pink Floyd, Queen, and Jimi Hendrix. They were the three kind of, you know, mainstays of my childhood. And then there was a lot of things around that, you know, but Elvis, because my dad wasn't that much of a fan, I didn't really listen to him, and then he became a fan more later in life. But what a voice! He's got a great voice.
Yeah.
Great
I
voice.
mean, the Six was all about music because, of course, it was a music festival. So it's a bit of a, kind of, all I could think is, were you at Theakston's or somewhere when you decided to start writing that? Because you could just get an idea of the festival and, yeah.
I can tell you exactly where I was when I knew I was going to write the Six. I think it was just after Edinburgh Book Festival. And I saw a poster on the train coming back from there, which was a 90s throwback festival. And they had like, you know, a few of the minor acts from the 90s would actually turn up. But then he had also like, you know, all the best tribute bands, they would say, of like the Britpop bands. So there'd be like, there's Noasis instead of Noasis, and Blade and things like that. And I thought, you know, like, oh, that, you know, I was tired and I thought, you know, I might go to that. And I didn't actually go. But it was on that train ride back that I was thinking about 90s music and that idea of trying to kind of recapture your youth, of going back to one of these festivals and you know, pretending you are in your teenage years again and kind of experiencing that. That's what directly influenced the Six, was just the poster that I saw at the train station. And it was that combined with an image of six people standing over a body not knowing what to do, that I wrote that book in 6 weeks, because it just kind of fell out of me because of that, because so strong, those two images, that it really kind of, you know, made it a lot easier to write. Now listen, it took 6 months to edit the 6 weeks of just a draft that I did, but you know, it's like that story was very much one of those where it happens every now and again, where it's just something is so strong, it makes it a lot easier to write. But yeah, I still haven't been, I still want to go to one of those 90s kind of festivals though. But isn't it strange now? It's like that's 32 years ago, was 1990.
Yeah. Oh, that
blows my mind.
That's scary because I was only 4 in the 90s.
I was only 7, but I mean, it was it's scary to think that was like 32 years ago, because that means that in 1990 my dad was 32. So I mean, so it's like trying to like kind of match up those you know, like going back those years. So like when I'm like a kid and my dad's like, you know, this show is from the 60s, and you think, oh, that's ages ago, and now Friends is on telly, and it's the same principle, you know, it's the same thing, you know, it's like it's the same distance and time. It's mad to think, like, but yeah, I love that kind of nostalgia. You see, I love all that kind of, you know, like I love anything to do with nostalgia. You know, I'll still play, you know, the original Super Mario Kart, the original Super Mario World, the original Sonic the Hedgehog, you know, and just remember being a kid and being able to, you know, and you know, like it throws you right back to those moments. So I'm a sucker for nostalgia in any shape or
form. I must admit, I do like playing video games whilst reviewing in order to keep my concentration. What do you do to distract yourself when you're writing?
I mean, it's a kind of combination of, I've got to play Football Manager a lot, and I've been playing that for 20 years now. It's still my go-to game, but I've got a PS4, but I go through stages with it. So like the Spider-Man games are my favorites at the moment. So I got the Miles Morales game for Christmas, and that was me done for like a week and a half. I was like, that's it, I'm every day. But mostly when I'm writing, I don't read much. I read a lot of non-fiction when I'm writing, because I don't like to kind of distract myself with better people's work and get all down about it. But I mean, like, there's a lot of distractions just in the house. I've got 2 kids, they're both like they're 12 and 15 now. There's a lot going on there. My wife's in university and she's got a lot going on, and we've just there's always something happening. But like, yeah, I watch telly every day, but I'm not a big, like, I like go through stages of a series. So like, I've only just watched Succession, for example. I'm like 4 years behind everyone else, but we just binge watched it in like 3 weeks. So I'm always behind. I have never seen The Wire. I'm like the only crime writer that hasn't, but I will watch it at some point, and I will just binge watch the whole thing. And usually I wait though until I've finished the book to do this kind of thing. So when I'm writing, it's really difficult to distract me from writing. So if I'll have like the whole book in my head, running through constantly. So it's really difficult for me to concentrate on anything that happens outside of that. So I don't tend to that's why I don't like reading as much because I can't really concentrate on it, because I'm starting to unpick things and go, well, that's interesting. That's an interesting device that writer's use. I'm not losing myself in the story, which is, my fault rather than the books I'm reading. So I don't tend to, but it's difficult because once you're in the middle of writing a novel, it can become all encompassing. Everything you think about is just related to that, and I'll talk to myself. And like, I'll be talking to myself about, I've got to try and sort that bit out there where so-and-so walks in with this bit, and then like, where are we going to put the body after they've done that? And like, like someone will be walking past going like, what's happened to that guy? It's like, but yeah, so I do play Football Manager though. That's always my procrastination is Football Manager, and I'll listen to TalkSport. I'm a massive sports fan. I mean, like, sport is just like, that's my second love. It's probably my first love. I mean, I know, but it isn't. It's my second love now. But it's it's football, boxing, and then a variety of Formula One is up there as well. They're my sports, and I'll be like, it's great at the moment because boxing on every week. So it's like, I love that kind of time. But football's the same. It's like, I'm a massive Liverpool fan, and that's easy way of distracting yourself is, if Liverpool have got a big game, or there's a good fight on a Saturday night, it's like, that's a great way of just losing yourself for a few hours and not thinking about a book for a while.
What do you think to the Premier League at the moment with the way that Liverpool and City are playing? I mean, I think that's going to be really intriguing, and I think Liverpool still might. I reckon Liverpool still might do it, mate.
I think, I mean, everything comes down to the Liverpool-Man City game. That's what it comes down to. It's that's going to be the big one. It's who wins that, I think, will go on and win the league. It's great. I mean, like, the last few years under Klopp have been fantastic. As a Liverpool fan who I grew up in the the first game I went to was Kenny Dalglish's testimonial in 1990 against Real Sociedad. That was the first game I went to, and it was also, I think, the last year we won anything of note. So we'd won, we won the FA Cup in 92, and then we did like the weird treble we did in 2001. We had the Champions League in 2005, which we should never have won. Jimmy Traore played for us, for God's sake. We should never have won that game, but we did.
That was amazing final, mate. Well,
that experience was just incredible. And we've had so many, but the last few years it's been sustained success of like the highest kind, where it's like we look like one of the best teams in the world. So that's great. The problem we've got is that we've got another team over in Manchester who just happen to be the greatest team in the world as well. So it's not just good enough now to just in previous years, if we'd have been like we are now, we'd have won the league every year for years, year on year. We would have won it every year. But we've got to, Man City are just, an incredible team. I think there are still twists and turns to come. I'm really glad it's so close as well, because the year we won it, I mean, even, I don't want to talk too much about, what happened at the end of that season, but, at one point we were just running away with it. We just ran away with it, and it does kind of, as much as it's great, it's fantastic. You know, you just go and it does take out some of the excitement of it because you know what's going to happen. You know you're going to win. You know,
Yeah,
but this is more exciting.
I
When
mean,
you've got a good like kind of battle, it's great.
I mean, I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about how the season's going for Newcastle because I'm a massive Newcastle fan. I've been a bit of a change since Christmas. So yeah.
I knew as soon as that takeover was announced, I was like, well, they're staying up. I'm pretty certain as well. I'm hoping at the expense of Everton. Sorry to any, but yeah, it was yeah. Although you know Trippier got injured and that was a bit of a blow, but it seems like Dan Burn is just awesome. He's like 6'7", just just heading everything away. That's exactly what your defense needed.
Oh, definitely, yeah, absolutely different planet. I mean, when we're talking about distractions from what you normally do, football's mine. But music, for you, as we've already discussed, is not just part of your distraction. You go on tour with other crime writers now.
Yeah, so you know, like I say the same thing whenever I talk about you know how I became a writer. I failed at numerous things beforehand. That's how I became a writer. I was a failed actor. I was a failed footballer. I was a failed boxer. I was a failed, you know, like just normal job. But I was a failed musician as well. And I was in various bands as a kid. I did the pub circuits until I was 26, 27, getting paid like 40 quid to do 3 hours in a pub, just me and an acoustic guitar, doing numerous songs to a group of people who just really wished there was a jukebox instead, you know, that kind of thing. It wasn't fun. So when I became a writer, I thought all that was done. I'm a massive, you know, music is like just so much of a part of my life. I can't write without music on. And it was a few years back, I was doing an event with Mark Billingham, and he came up to me afterwards, and I knew him and Stuart Neville and Doug Johnston had been at the book festival over in America, Balshicon, and they got up and done a set at the House of Blues where they riffed through a few songs, and I knew that the reaction from that was really good. What I didn't know was that Edinburgh Book Festival had been on to Doug to say, "Can you get a band together, and I'll book you for next year's festival?" And Doug said, "Okay." So Mark comes up to me anyway. We just done an event together. We're in the pub afterwards, and he comes up to me and he says, "Luca, can you play drums or bass?" And I thought very quickly, I never say no to any kind of opportunity like this. But what was the problem here is that I didn't play drums or bass. What I did play was guitar. I just played, you know, acoustic guitar, electric guitar, and all that type of thing. And I thought, well, bass is a kind of a guitar, so I'll just say bass. So I said, "Yeah, I can play bass." And he was like, "Great, we're putting a band together." And I was like, "Okay, this is going nowhere." And I didn't hear anything for 4 months. And then all of a sudden I get an email where it's like, "We're booked. We're in the diary. We're doing it. We're doing Edinburgh Book Festival, and we got the band together. It's me. It's Mark Billingham. It's Stuart Neville. It's Doug Johnston, and it's Val McDermott." And at this point, Val McDermott I hadn't ever spoke to her. I just admired her from afar because I absolutely adore her books, and I was just a massive fanboy. But I'd never had the confidence. And bear in mind, I've been a writer for 5-6 years at this point. Never had the confidence to go and have a conversation with her. But she's now our lead singer in a band that didn't exist until 5 minutes ago. You know, it's one of those. And we're going to call ourselves the Fun-Loving Crime Writers. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. So we say, right, okay, we need to get a rehearsal. And we had one rehearsal, basically, before the Edinburgh Book Festival. And it just so happened that my dad does music shows and stuff like that, and he had rehearsal rooms. So everyone met up in Liverpool, and we all got together. And I knew after 5-10 minutes that this was going to work, and it was going to be a great band, and we're going to be a lot better than people think. And I think it comes down to the fact that Stuart, Doug, and myself had played in bands, like I said, for years and years and years, and we were all just failed rock stars. And it turned out that Mark, Val, and latterly Chris Brookmeyer, who only was supposed to do one song, who just turned up and now plays lead guitar somehow. He's just one of those guys who can learn things really quickly. they were all perfect front people. They were just the perfect group of people to have at the front, while we have the nucleus at the back, because they would all want to be rock stars. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And now they are, every one of them, because we played Glastonbury, which is still the most ridiculous thing ever. But it's been going now for 4 years. I think we've been doing this now.
Yeah.
We had a whole tour lined up just before COVID hit, and we're just getting those gigs back on. But like this year, we've got numerous gigs lined up. It's the most fun I've ever had on stage, and I've played closing. I mean, must be closing the 1,000 rock mark of gigs I've played in my past. This is by far the most fun I've ever had in a band, ever, because no one takes themselves seriously. We are a party band. We're not sitting there writing our own, material and arguing and all that type of thing. This is just, we're there to have fun, and we want people to have fun as well. And we want to bring something a little bit different to book events, because book events, book festivals, they're great. They're fantastic. And you can go and listen to people be erudite and entertaining and informative. But late at night, you don't need to have another one of those. You can have a gig instead, and we can all have a good party. We can all jump and put down and have a great time. And it's great fun. And I always say we should put it on as like a tagline: fun, love, and crime writers, not as bad as you think we're going to be.
Well, I definitely agree with that, because I've been to every Fleetson's gig, and I must admit that some of my favourite songs are the ones that not Jesus, the country ones. What's your favourite song that like pick and go?
What's been interesting is that the favourite song I do with the band, or just my favourite song in general?
Either. Or
I'll do both. So my favourite song we do with the band. What's interesting about the band is that until recently, we didn't do any songs that were released before I was born. After I was born, so everything was like pre my date of birth. So it's like all very old songs. So I had to learn a lot of different songs. So that's been great, because it's kind of widened my music knowledge. I mean, I do like a lot of old songs anyway, but there was stuff I'd never heard of. My favourite song to play in the band is Down in the Tube Station at Midnight, which is an old jam song. That's my favourite, because that's got a brilliant bass line in it. It's most enjoyable to play. I always like the ending on 500 Miles as well, because it's not any, because we do songs that are based on crime and like so we do Watching the Detectives and I Fought the Law and all that kind of thing. 500 Miles is just because half the band are Scottish. That's why we do 500 Miles. But that's much fun to. My favourite song of all time is difficult. I've got about 2 or 3. There's a song called Glorious by Muse, which I adore. Is Every Stranger's Eyes by Roger Waters, and one of my probably my favourite. If I was going to my head, I would say Whole of the Moon by the Waterboys. Whole of the Moon by the Waterboys is just one of those songs where if you start digging into the lyrics, you realise how much is going on behind behind that. It's not just a pretty song, like it's not just a great hook or anything like that. The lyrics say so much about how people are and things like that, and how you can see things from 2 different points of view and see it completely differently. The whole basis of that song is like, I saw the crescent, you saw the whole of the moon, that kind of thing. But I love that kind of song, but I just love that. Yeah, that's one of my favorite songs.
I must admit, when I started listening to the songs you were choosing, it was trying to guess what link they were to crime, and how many murders were going to be in each song.
We have to do a count. We'll have to do a count, Alex. We'll have to work out how many people are we responsible for killing every night. But I mean, it did work out. One of the, I think we've got T-shirts to say murdering songs for fun. I mean, that it lends itself well to all kinds of little things like that. A criminally good time, that kind of thing is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's brilliant. To get to know your imagination and where it goes. But going back to the book and a bit more serious. Before we started, you were talking about your research has as a student into male widows and things. Yeah, could you tell us a bit about that? And
Yeah, so
yeah,
I wrote my first novel during my first year at university as a mature student, and I studied psychology and criminology. And I'd always had like that kind of fascinating, you know, like in my 20s, like I was watching a lot of crime thrillers, and I read all crime novels. That's when I got back into reading, was in my mid-20s. And you know, I was kind of interested a lot in criminality and things like that. So I studied criminology and I studied psychology. And the idea for my first novel came very much ripped from those psychology lectures that I was doing, you know. But we were talking earlier about what I kind of remember most about doing that degree, and what kind of has always resonated was this kind of research that I did into male widows. It's not something that is kind of talked about a lot. Is men who have lost partners. So that was what was the basis around this report. So we had to find men who had been widowed and interview them. And it just so happened that my father-in-law was a widow, and like, you know, I didn't really know the guy at this point. I've been married for a few years, but like it was all, you know, it's the same as anyone probably knows their own like in-laws after that period of time. Is that it's very like, you know, on a, you know, like a front type of thing. You know, it's not in depth. And I had to approach him, and he was very gladly said yes, he would talk about it. And it was during those couple of hours where I was talking to him, where, you know, like, you know, learning about the impact he'd had, that losing his partner, and he'd lost his partner quite early in his life as well. You know, it was they had, you know, she was in her 40s and he was only in his early 50s, and you know, they had all these plans that they were going to, you know, as they got older, and like, you know, they were going to retire together. You know, they were going to have all these ideas, and that was all kind of taken away. And as much as I knew that, like, you know, I knew he'd gone through this, and in fact, the first time I ever met him was at the funeral for his partner. I didn't really know how it had affected his life until I spoke to him, and I had to take all of that information and kind of write a report based on it. And I think that's where I kind of, it's having those experiences that mean that when I write my novels, you know, I have a very much more of an eye on the people who are left behind and how they're affected by what happens to you know, a victim in the book. I don't want to just like, you know, I still discuss the victims and give them their own voice and that type of thing. But the grief of those who have lost behind is what I've always been kind of focused on. And it was something that kind of came to me recently, was that a lot of my books are about grief. And it's because early on, it was because I had no idea about grief. I didn't go to my first funeral for someone I knew until only a few years ago. I've been incredibly lucky in my life that I haven't lost anyone until a couple of years ago. And then I lost my nan, and then I lost my granddad a couple of years ago as well. And I think a lot of my books deal with grief, but I think it goes right back to studying psychology and learning about that. It's kind of, because I've always spent my life kind of obsessed with grief, because I didn't know what it was about, because I was petrified of it. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know how it felt. I didn't know how I was going to react to it. And then studying it in psychology, and like, you know, having it there in front of me when I was talking to my father-in-law about his grief and how he had dealt with the loss. And, you know, still trying to take a step back and writing, like, you know, a 5,000 word report about it.
Yeah.
It kind of led with that. It kind of gave me that fascination with that subject matter, and it's kind of influenced every novel I've written. Grief is all over those pages, those people who are left behind, and how they deal with it. And the best thing anyone's ever said to me is that you don't. I think it goes back to that when I was doing that report. It's like, you don't learn to live with it. You don't learn to get over it. You don't get over it. You don't forget. You know, you just learn to live with it. You learn to live with it every day, and every day it'll affect you a little bit differently. But you don't get over it. It doesn't ever leave you, that grief. You just learn to live with it.
Well, the emotion definitely comes across in the new book. So yeah,
it was so important for me that it wasn't It wasn't just like, lots of things happening and like guns and explosions and all that type of thing. It's like, I didn't want that. I wanted a very emotional story because it comes from a very emotional place. It comes from a very personal, emotional place. It's kind of has affected me throughout my entire life. I will never feel normal about what happened when I was 8 years old and I'm sat there waiting for my mum to come back on Mother's Day. I'll never feel normal about that. So when I was writing about it, I didn't want to do that 8-year-old version of me in disservice. I wanted to get that emotion into the novel, whilst also entertaining the reader, because that's my job at the end of the day, is to entertain people for 400 pages or 10 hours of listening time. That's what's important, because I'm asking you as a reader or a listener. I think they're both the same thing, though. I don't buy into this idea that you're not reading the books if you're listening to them. But argued that point with people very strongly. But I am asking you to take so much time out of your life as a reader that I have to entertain as well. But what I don't want to do is to just entertain just by rote. I want to make you feel invested. I want you to care what's going to happen to these characters. I want you to keep turning the page because you want to know what happens at the end. You want to make sure that what you feel is about these characters is right or wrong or whatever. It's like I just want your attention, because we're all battling for your attention right now, because as we're talking about before, there's all these distractions. Like I'll put a book down because of what Liverpool are playing, but if it's a good book, I'll feel it. I'll feel like, well, if Liverpool don't score in the first 10 minutes, I might start inching towards the book. But we're battling against so many other forms of entertainment that my number one job is to entertain a reader. And I feel like I do that best when I throw like emotion into it. I feel I do that best when I make you care about characters and what happens to them. So that's where the book comes from, is that kind of genuine place of I want a reader I want their full attention for as long as possible.
When going into audiobooks, because as you just said, audiobooks, and they are the same for me, and they seem to be the same for you. Why would you argue that? Because a lot of people I speak to, particularly authors, say they don't even like to listen to the audiobook because it kind of like, it's a different experience for them.
It's interesting. I battled hard. My first 4 books were narrated by an excellent narrator who did the prose brilliantly. And I remember the first time I heard it, because I listened to all of mine, by the way. I listened to all my audiobooks because I feel like it is a different experience to reading them, but it's no less of an experience. It's just a different experience. It's still reading. It's still the same thing. You're still experiencing a novel. I don't buy into this idea that it's not. You are still listening to the written word. You're just taking it in a different. You're not taking it in through your eyes. You're taking it in through your ears. Why does that all of a sudden make a difference? I don't buy into it. Anyway, it's. I listened to the guy who did the first 4 books, a fantastic prose narrator. I loved it, and then he did this Scouse accent, and it sounded like anyone else who tries to do a Scouse accent and thinks they're doing it really well, but anyone from around here can tell you it does not sound right. So I always got a bit like about that. I had a fantastic narrator for the 6, because that was my choice. I wanted Neil Fitzmaurice, who is a Scouse actor who I have known for a long time. He was in Phoenix Nights like 20 years ago now, that is. And he played Ray Vaughn in Phoenix Nights. And he was one of the first kind of people who came to mind when I was thinking about narrators, because he's just got a great voice. But with this book, it was different. It was trying to find someone, because it became very clear early on that we were only going to have one narrator. And I think I agree with you, Alex. I don't think that was a right decision. I think it can be difficult when you've got multiple characters. But unfortunately, I have no say over these things. But we needed someone who could do not just a British accent, but an American accent as well, which brings its own difficulties. That kind of thing is really difficult to kind of because everything doesn't always sound right to your ear. You know what I mean? It's like you start analysing, but what it does do though, listen to the audiobooks, is it makes me feel more comfortable about a book after I've written it. Because as much as I can read it and go over it and think that that sounds fine, it looks fine, it looks great. I don't think I can do anything else to this. And I could read it and not have the same experiences when I'm listening to it. If I have the experience when listening to it, it's like, oh, I can't believe I wrote that. Which is what I had when I very first listened to Dead Gone. Was like, oh, that sounds like a proper book. That does. It's like, it's that is when I feel comfortable with letting go and like, okay, the book's going to go out into the world, and I feel comfortable about it. Like, so for example, like You Never Say Goodbye. When I was listening to the audio book of that, a lot of the notes that I was thinking in my head, he was hitting them properly, and I was like, okay, I've done that, and like, I believe that's the best book I've written until I've written the next one. I always try and write the next book always got to be the best book. But that book meant so much to me that I never felt comfortable until I listened to the audio book, and then I thought, okay, that is the sentence structures and things like that were exactly how I was going. The emotional bits were exactly how I was trying to get them, and yeah.
Because for me, it's kind of really difficult because I learned to write by listening to audiobooks, and now I've got to do it the other way because I've just got an announcement today, people. I have been signed by Spellbound, and my book will be coming out in July, all hoping. Yeah.
Woo!
It's
so good as well. I mean, like, Alex, don't do yourself down. Tell them what it's about and tell them who it's involving.
Well, it's got Steve Kavanagh in it, of course. One half of your amazing podcast, Two Comrades of the Macron. Because Steve is a legal writer, and the premise of my book is that I'm doing sections of my own life. So the middle part is my law degree, and then I talked to Steve about his writing and his books, and then I've got a short story as well. So it's like 3 books in one.
See, this is a bargain, and making this is like
it's really bizarre as a kind of structure, and it's taken a year and a half to write 80% of it. And we're at the point now where we're just jiggling it about a bit and deciding what things are missing.
See, like, we were talking earlier about this, is that, that's how I started as a writer. I was a blogger. I was a reviewer. And there's far many more bloggers and reviewers now than there was 10 years ago, which is fantastic because it felt like, there was only like a few of us back then. But that's how I started. Is I was a massive reader as a kid, and then I stopped reading in my mid-teens. Stopped reading, and then I kind of picked it up again when my kids were born and started reading. And I was reading so much that I felt like obligated to give something back. So I started doing the blog reviews, where I started reviewing books. And it was coming through that community when I started talking to other writers that kind of gave me the confidence to try writing myself. And I assume that's the same for you as well, Alex. Is that
absolutely?
That community has been such a kind of influence as well.
Yeah, I mean, I started in writing as part of a Nottinghamshire writing group before I started blogging, and I just thought, why don't I give this a go?
That's the thing. Like, people always ask me, like, I did an event last week in Sheffield, and one of the people in the audience was asking me, like, how, I'm getting to like 60,000 words, and I don't know what to do, and I don't even know why I'm doing it, and all that type of thing. And it's like, it's really easy for me to sit there and say, like, oh, just finish it, you'll be fine, don't worry about it. But it's such a huge thing to do. It's a huge chunk of your life that that you have to take out and spend time. Time is precious, and like, we're spending doing this. But on the opposite side, it's like, everyone's got a story to tell. I'm fascinated by this book. I can't wait to read what you've written, because I'm fascinated by everyone's story. I'm interested in everyone's different story, and like, you know, I love to learn about people, and I think, you know, everyone should at least try it. And look, not everyone's going to make it. Not everyone is going to actually be able to do it. But there's no harm in trying something. There's absolutely zero harm. You're not hurting anyone by doing that, unless it's libelous, in which case, don't take my advice. But it's like, you know, it's like, life is too short to be wondering about what ifs. Do you know? It's not. It's far too short. No, we haven't got, you know, an infinite amount of time on Earth. We should do the things that make us happy, and we should find out the things that make us scared, because those things that make us scared could be the things that make you happy, because that's exactly what I did. I was petrified when I first started showing my stories to people. I was petrified when I sent my novel out, because I was petrified that people would say, "That's awful. Why have you done this?" But now this is my full-time job. This is my career. This is what I'll be doing until I die. You don't get to retire as a writer unless you leave child. You know, it's as simple as that. There's only one guy who was allowed to retire, and that was him. But no one else is. You know, I'll be doing it until I die, because I can't imagine doing anything else with my life. And it was because I took a chance. I took a chance in writing a novel and found the career that I loved. I've never been more happy with a job. I've done the worst jobs in the world. I've done some terrible, terrible jobs. I never knew what I wanted to do growing up, and because I kept failing at everything. But like, this is the best job in the world. That's why I'm so supportive of other people, is because I want them to be as happy as I am. You know, like, I've written a novel there, You Never Say Goodbye, that I've been wanting to write for years. And it's allowed me to explore something that happened to me in my personal life. That ability to do that is kind of made me get over certain things and kind of make peace with certain things in my life. I would never have been able to do that. I'd have just been like, I'd have been in my 40s and 50s and 60s, just still having that hanging over my head. Now I can kind of look at it and go, like, I dealt with it now. I dealt with it through fiction, and I dealt with it through writing. Having the ability to do that is a joy. So yeah, I can't wait. I can't. You make sure that I when you know, I want to read. You know, as soon as that comes available, I want to read it.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's put it this way: there's going to be so many proof copies going out that the publishers will be going, "You can't give them too many out because."
I love it. I love it. Oh, great! I can't wait. It's great, and like, you know, I love anything like that. It's good news is always great. You know, as me, it's like, it's been a terrible time over the past. Feels like for a long time now, we're kind of inundated with bad news after bad news.
Well,
all these moments of goodness we have to kind of cling on to. Not forget the bad. You know, the things that are going on in the world now are just horrendous and horrific.
Yeah.
But when we get these little kernels of good news for people, you want to just celebrate it, because, you know, it's important that we do, because, you know, life can't be all dark. We need the light as well.
Yeah. I mean, it all started for me because of the pandemic, but then you did something for the Russell Trust as a festival with Steve.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a bit about that?
So it was, I think it was during one of the many lockdowns that we had. I don't know how many we had in the end, but
during lockdown too, I think it was.
There were so many festivals being cancelled left and right, and what another thing that we found was that the food banks were under tremendous strain. They weren't getting the funding that they usually did. And we wanted to do something that kind of gave back, but we also wanted to kind of be a bit more inclusive as well. As that, so like, we saw all these online events going on, and we thought, what about just doing a 3-day festival where we have multiple events? We charge 20 quid a ticket for the entire weekend, and all the money raised goes to the Russell Trust, which is a food bank charity. So within, I think we set it up with 6 weeks to go. We had absolutely no idea what we were doing. And Steve is great for that kind of thing, because he goes, I've had an idea. How do we do it? How do we do it, Luca? And then I have to kind of work out how we did it. So we kind of like put all these things together. We contacted as many writers as we knew, and we didn't get a single person saying no. They were all willing to give up time to support it. We had 50 authors and different people in the first Locked Up Festival, and I think we went over that in the second one. Yeah. And we raised over 25 grand for the Trussell Trust. We had some of the most incredible events I think could ever have. I mean, like the one that you loved the most was the Michael Connolly, Titus Welliver, Mark Billingham, David Morrissey chart.
That was brilliant, mate. Absolutely.
I mean, that was incredible. That was one of those things that you don't think are going to actually happen until 5 minutes before, when Titus shows up on the screen and you think, oh, he's the coolest man alive. Titus, by the way, such a nice man. Such a nice man. He was just more than happy to help out in any way he could. David Morrissey the same. So you have like these really big actors, but we also had, some amazing people involved in it, and the best crime writers around who all gave up their time to do it. It was the most amazing thing to be a part of. A hell of a lot of work. But what was the best thing? I mentioned this to you earlier as well, and I've said this on numerous occasions since. The best thing about doing that festival was the emails I got afterwards, which were from people who normally wouldn't be able to go to a book festival. And that may be because the price is too prohibitive, or, the distance is too much. Like, I had people contacting me from all around the world who weren't usually available to get to like a Harrogate because it's just too much, it's too far. And then people who had mobility issues and things like that, who just, couldn't get to a festival just because, of those kind of issues, who said that not only were they just so happy to have seen that many events in that short space of time, like they also felt like they were part of a community as well of readers, because what we did have during every event was a chat function throughout the whole thing, where people were talking to each other. And they would have conversations, and we saw friendships being made in those chats. We saw, communities coming together, and that in itself was what I couldn't have asked for more doing it, and it's such a rewarding experience. That I'll probably will end up doing another one. I don't know when and I don't know how, but
if you do, I'm already signing up. I'll do it for you.
We've just got to try and top the last one. That's the problem.
Yeah. To end on, I'll just ask you what's next, because we've only got like 3 minutes.
So next, the book is tentatively called Trust in Me. And it's about a psychotherapist who receives a new patient who comes in and confesses to a murder that the therapist knows she cannot have done because she is the one who committed it.
Okay, that sounds great.
And that's all I can say at this point.
They're getting darker and darker, mate. I will say that.
There's not as much Scouse humour in there now. Now, this is a bit, yeah. I've been working on this one for 6 months now. I'm really excited about it, and I'm really, really excited about it. And as I said earlier, every book I approach, this is going to be the best book I'm going to write, and up to now, You Never Say Goodbye is the best book I've ever written until this one, and then that'll be the best book I've ever written, and then hopefully the next one after that will be the best book I've ever written, and that's the way I keep pushing myself.
Well, that's the best way to be, I think. Yeah. Thank you so much for such a great hour, and getting to learn so much about the way you think as well.
Thank you very much for having me, Alex. I really appreciate it.
No problem at all, and it was a great book.
Thank you.
And if one thing I would say, give the audiobook a go, people, because it's definitely still worth it, even though it needed 2 narrators. I'll say that.
Just in your head, pretend there are 2.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Alex.
Thanks. And I'm just going to click off now, everybody, and I'll see everybody next week for Gillian Godden.
Oh, excellent. Bye, everyone.
Bye. I will get there in the end.